Bearcat Blitz. Welcome in everybody to our final, well, I guess one more technically pre-camp show on the board, but it's the final show before camp weeks begin for the Cincinnati Bearcats football team. I'm your host, Russ Eltman from Cincinnati Bearcats on SI, and joined as always by my co-host, Neil Meyer from the frontofficenews.com, Cincinnati Bearcats coverage there as well. We have Desmond Ridder in action at Cincinnati Bengals training camp. We'll start off the show by talking about that, and then we'll get to our top defensive storylines entering fall camp for the Cincinnati Bearcats football team. How will the defensive secondary look this year? Will they be able to force some more turnovers this fall? The defensive ends. Who's going to rush the passer? Who are the main pass rushers? People probably don't have a good handle on that going into these next few weeks because it's a lot of new faces on that side of the ball. All of that and more coming up on Bearcat Blitz across the Believe Network this weekend. Stay with us after these messages. Neil, fall camp is nearly here. We will be there on Monday afternoon in the woods of Indiana at the Higher Ground Conference Center to see the team in action. They're starting to get back into their on-field workouts. Same with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are already in the midst of their training camp right now, their camp entering the 2025 season. And Desmond Ridder in action, Neil. He's getting reps with the Bengals right now, trying to work out and mine out a path in the NFL here. And he spoke with the media after his first practice on Wednesday. Just said there were a lot of emotions. The place that brought me here, driving down I-71, just opening up down that hill and seeing where you're going to be, hopefully for this year and obviously years to come. It was a great feeling, quote there from Ridder. And he also mentioned that he's worked with Joe Burrow before. Neil, he's actually shares a trainer with Joe Burrow. And he said, we met before, we have the same trainer, just being around him, being in the building with him, seeing how he works in the meeting room, seeing how he works in practice. Like I told someone earlier, he just makes everyone around him better. Seems like Desmond Ridder acquainting himself well at the beginning of training camp for the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll see if it's going to lead to him sticking with the franchise throughout at least this entire season.
Yeah, and it was a great sight to see, right? Obviously, a full circle moment for our guy Desmond Ridder to have this opportunity to come back to Cincinnati. But Russ, it was interesting too when the signing of Desmond Ridder came into reality over the weekend that they released Logan Woodside as well, who's the practice squad quarterback. So there's real opportunity for Desmond Ridder to find a practice squad deal here in Cincinnati and continue to learn from a guy like Joe Burrow, who he has extended praise for in his media scrums the other day. So that's huge to see. But on top of it, I'm excited for him to be back in the Cincinnati. And when you watch the videos of him reflecting on what it's like to be back in the city of Cincinnati, you can see it just by how his expressions and how happy he was to actually be back here in Cincinnati. You can tell this city holds a lot of weight close to his heart. Obviously, we talked about it earlier in the week. It's where he started his family. He played his collegiate career. But overall, you can see how much this city really means to a guy like Desmond Ridder on a personal level. So that was cool to see as well. But I'm excited for him to learn from Joe Burrow. And obviously, as you head into day 3 of fall camp, you still got 2 more weeks roughly for the Bengals with training camp going 3 weeks roughly. But overall, that's 3 weeks of great opportunity to arguably learn from the best quarterback in all of football right now with Joe Burrow. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Desmond Ridder, and I'm excited to see what kind of come to play here in the next few weeks for a guy like Des.
Yeah, it was awesome seeing. I'd almost forgotten that there's another Bearcat with the Bengals right now,
Jamoy
Jamoy
Mays.
Mays, and he threw a pass to him already this week. So the Bearcat to Bearcat connection is strong. Desmond Ridder working his way, hopefully, up the depth chart for the Cincinnati Bengals this summer. We'll see how that all plays out in the next few weeks. We're going to see how this defense plays out in the next few weeks as well. Neil, we'll touch on that, get to the top storylines surrounding the defense entering fall camp after these messages on Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. Defense largely, Neil, as we return here on Bearcat Blitz. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, joined by my co-host, Neil Meyer. The overarching strength for this program in the Scott Satterfield area, especially last season, the defense was, I would say, the strength of the team compared to the offense, especially the red zone defense, Neil. I mean, stout red zone defense from the Cincinnati Bearcats football team in 2024. They ranked, I believe, in the top 20 nationally, right around the top 20 in touchdown percentage allowed in the red zone. They were, yeah, like right 24th overall. So they were at 51.28%, 24th overall in the entire country, allowing touchdowns last season. Much worse total defense wise. They gave up a lot of yards per game, 86th nationally in yards per game, 85th to be exact, allowing just over 385 yards per game. So, Neil, it was a bend don't break unit last year, and a bend don't break unit in the sense that they got around a lot of footballs, and this is where we're going to start with the storylines, in my opinion, but didn't force a ton of turnovers. They weren't able to end drives very consistently, very quickly last season, and that's why there were so many red zone opportunities for teams to get inside that area and get 39 chances to get after the Bearcats defense in the red zone across 12 games. So that isn't like way up there in the national rankings, but we got to remember, there's teams that played 13 games, 14 games, 15 games, 16 games. I mean, there's a lot more games being played
Mhm.
for these teams at the top of the red zone trip rankings. So that's kind of, you got to take it with a grain of salt in that sense. Interception wise, Neil, and that's where I'll turn the mic over to you, so to speak. Just five interceptions for Cincinnati last season. That tied for 118th nationally. And you're bringing in a guy in Matthew McDoom, who you're hopeful can be the kind of sparking plug to turn that number around and turn some of these PBUs into full-fledged interceptions.
Yeah, that's a great talking point too, Russ. And obviously, while we're talking about the defense, there's two things that go into factor right that, and I'll hit on both of them. The defensive line last year, obviously, everybody knew that Dante Corleone was getting triple teamed just about every play. So the edge rushers really weren't getting the pressures that they wanted to in order to force those inherent throws to where the defense could come away with interceptions per se. So now that you got a defensive line that enters the season fully healthy, with the likes of Jalen Hunt and Micah Coleman both returning from injuries, I think that will help Cincinnati in a sense to where you'll be able to get pressure to the quarterbacks, to where you might see those interceptions numbers or opportunities climb a little bit more,
Right.
right?
Because it's
Jalen
not
Hunt,
just about the secondary, right, Neil? People need to realize that it's the
it starts
pressures
with the pressure
created
up
by the
front.
defensive line a lot of times in the sport of football lead to those wonky passes, those inaccurate passes that are much easier to intercept.
Yeah, and it starts with the guys up front. Obviously, people look back on last season. You lose Dante Corleone for a game, and he was never 100% up until arguably what, late November, roughly, maybe early December. So, on top of it, when you're still dealing with his situation, Jalen Hunt was a bigger loss than people expected last year, right? That gives you another 6'3", 330-pound defensive tackle, 320-pound, 330-pound defensive tackle who could really put some pressure on offensive lines that could free guys up like Eric Phillips or guys like Marquez Parker a season ago. So I'm excited to see him back fully healthy. It's going to be limited. It's going to be interesting to see what his role might be next season. And Micah Coleman as well was a big blow for Cincinnati last year when he went down with the Achilles injury. So to see them come back, I'm really excited to see how do those guys fit into Walt Stewart's defensive scheme to where they can come in there and they can blow up the quarterback to where they can get some pressure to force interceptions. Now, flipping the script to the secondary, you mentioned this team only had 5 interceptions last season. I'll give a hot take right now. Antoine Peak's going to play a big role for this defense this year. Everybody's talking Matthew McDoom, which they should be, respectfully so. Big time cornerback addition from Coastal Carolina. Antoine Peak had a much bigger impact on this defense than people realized last season. Yes, we only had
The punch man.
5 interceptions as a whole. You would like to see that near the double digit mark. But Antoine Peak Jr. with a great offseason in the weight room with Nico Palizzetti, and you can see the difference in his body, and we'll see it once we go out to camp again. He looks like he's added more weight, and on top of it, he looks stronger, he looks faster, And then on top of it, when he had five forced fumbles a season ago, I think he is going to really turn some heads and take the lead of this defense there at that free safety position within Tyson Vite's 3-3-5 defense. I'm excited for what he does this season, but I think there's real opportunity that Cincinnati's defense could come away with hopefully double-digit interceptions this season.
And really, all your interceptions are leaving, right, Neil? I mean, you had
Mhm.
two from Josh Minkins last year out of the program. He's gone. His eligibility's done. Derek Canteen also not in the program anymore. He had one interception. Trey Gola Callard is still. Is he still? I don't actually know. He's
Yeah,
gone
he's
as
still on the
well.
roster.
Oh,
Nope,
he is
he's
still on the
here.
roster.
Yep,
All right, so
he's at
they
senior
have Trey Gola
season.
Callard. He's probably going to be in the starting mix this year. So two returning interceptions from last season. One from Gola Coward and one from Logan Wilson. So as you mentioned, somebody's going to have to step up. We'll see if that is Antoine Peak Jr. Do you anticipate, Neil, them rolling with Peak at a more safety role and letting Sanks blossom more in the star position? Or do you think there's more of a split in that sense and it's kind of Sanks and Peak roll going back and forth at that spot and you have more with of a Trey Gola Callard and Christian Harrison, Xavier Williams, Taden Barnes mixture at the safety position?
That's a good question. It's a good question, and obviously that'll be something we kind of really hone in
I guess we
on.
can't really answer it right now. We'll have to see what they look like with pads on, right?
But it is going to be interesting too because Jaquan Sanks played quality snaps as a freshman, and he is poised to have another breakout year
Yeah,
alongside fellow freshman Simeon Coleman there at the linebacker position. Those two guys played what, Russ? What was it, 950 snaps between the two as true
that's a lot.
freshmen? Like you don't see that much at Cincinnati per se, right? But it's going to be interesting to see where do we see a guy like Trey Coward come into play, Matthew McDoom, Logan Wilson, Antoine Peak, Jaquan Sanks. It's going to be interesting to see what the secondary might look like. Now, people are kind of expecting Christian Harrison to be at that free safety position. Now, whether it's the star position is still kind of up in the air, but I would expect to see Antoine Peak on the field as much as possible. I thought this team was much better when he was on the field last season, and he's so versatile. He's so athletic. You can do multiple different things. He can play multiple different positions. So it's going to be interesting, Russ. I think you and I haven't had a full gauge of what this thing might look like in terms of the defense since the end of spring ball. We saw what we saw out in April up at Nippert Stadium for fall camp, but now that summer's starting to come, Logan Wilson gets that extra year of eligibility. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of role he might have, right? Everybody's expecting Matthew McDoom to have that number one corner spot kind of locked down, but Logan Wilson could also be a guy that steps into that role. So there's so
Yeah.
many question marks on this defense, but the secondary is definitely going to be the point of focus. But I'm very excited for Jaquan Sanks and Antoine Peak, both in whatever role they both might have this year. But both of them are going to play huge roles for this Bearcats team this year.
I mentioned, and we've mentioned the 100+ ranking in total interceptions last season. Neil, it's not like they were getting their hands on a lot of footballs and then dropping them. It's not like that was really what was happening. They also ranked poorly in the passes defended metric when you look at them ranking, let's see here, 106th nationally. So basically the same ranking in interceptions and passes defensed, and they had 41 pass breakups last season. So you just got it. The ball skills have to be better. The execution in the secondary has to be a little bit better. And you just got to get your hands in the better spots because Neil, for the most part last season, under Tyson Vite and now exited Kerry Coombs, and you put in Eddie Hicks, or is Eddie, yeah, Eddie Hicks at the cornerback
Hmm.
position, and Adam Braithwaite at the safety position, are kind of tag teaming that secondary spot. The coverage last year by the tracking data was good. The hand skills, not good in terms of breaking up passes, catching interceptions. But when you look at what they did coverage wise on Pro Football Focus's metrics, they ranked 42nd nationally with an 82 overall coverage grade out of 100. And the top coverage grade in the country was Texas at 91.7. So, not a major gap between them and the best defensive graded coverage unit on Pro Football Focus. When we look at the pass rush, though, Neil, and that's where we'll go next on the storylines entering this fall camp. That's where the big issues arise. 26th worst pass rush grade in the entire country with a 65.8 mark from Pro Football Focus last year. They did not get after the quarterback heavily in 2025. And I think, Neil, you touched on that a little bit when you were talking about the connection between the defensive line and the secondary. We should get a much, much greater impact from that
Mhm.
defensive line, as just mentioned by the depth that you touched on coming back, but also, I mean, Dante Corleone is now a man amongst boys at that nose tackle position going into his fifth college season, and he doesn't have any restrictions that have been hanging him up at all, really, since the past. We're almost at 12 months since he was cleared. We're at 11 months basically since he was cleared for full contact. That to me is the biggest reason, Neil, why we should see that 65.6 pass rush grade boost up to at least the mid 70s, closer to the 80s this time around, and give the secondary that many more opportunities to make a play on some wonky passes.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a guy like Dante Corleone, he's going to come out with a vengeance, right? Last season kind of was I wouldn't say a fluke for him, but with everything going on that he had to deal with, it wasn't really fair to him in a sense, right? He came out there, he battled, he overcame
Right.
everything, but he never got the full opportunity to really showcase what we saw in
It was
2022,
just brutal timing. I
2023.
mean, if
Yeah,
the clots
exactly.
happen in April as opposed to late June, maybe he's more of a normal self the whole season. It's just he's only a human being, man. Like people can't
Right.
you can't expect him.
And it's
And
hard
not that you
too.
and I were doing that, but speaking to fans in general, you couldn't expect him to be dominant coming off of conditions
And
like
it's
that.
hard too, because in a world where we live with the mental health aspect as well, being a young student athlete, dealing with that is never easy. Dealing with that in general is never easy. So for
And
Dante,
then you factor in the money, which everybody knows about now. And Dante obviously is one of the higher paid players on the team.
right. So on top of it, the mental aspect, it's a much clearer focus for him heading into 2025 compared to 2024 because 2024 was so murky because nobody knew what could happen, right? With how serious blood clots are, nobody knew what could happen, right? We didn't know if we would see them at all in 2025. At one
Exactly.
point, you and I were sitting on the show was like, okay, what happens if Dante can't play? Dante overcame everything. He fought hard. He came back to the field and he dominated, right? But now that he has a full off season, he doesn't have to worry about those restrictions. I think this could be a year where we see the 2022, 2023 Dante Corleone come to play again and play a huge role, especially now that he has the likes of Micah Coleman, Jalen White McLean, Marquez Parker, Jalen Hunt alongside of him. Cincinnati has the depth up front, pending as long as no one gets hurt in fall camp. They have the depth and they have the pieces that they could really pluck and play and kind of do a lot of certain things to free Dante Corleone up to where he does things best, and that's get to the quarterback.
Right. Jalen White McLean, you mentioned him, Old Dominion transfer, CJ McCray as well. Those guys should
Hmm.
factor in. Rob Jackson played solid ball down the stretch last season. Micah Coleman, you're not expecting him to be super impactful coming off an Achilles. I think that would be asking a little bit too much, but he's going to give you something, I would imagine. And then, as you noted, Marquez Parker, a younger player, sophomore player that could pop on this defense. And what do we get out of a guy like Jalen Hunt? Is he going to be able to kind of fully step in for Dante Corleone and be able to take as much snaps as possible? Because if they can give Dante Corleone a trusted breather here and there, as you mentioned, Neil, it's just going to make him more and more impactful as you get later and later in the game. So, in terms of the starting defensive ends, I would probably roll with Jackson at one spot, Neil, right now. And then it's just going to be kind of a dark night, break the pool stick and throw it on the ground situation between Coleman, Jalen Mike McLean, Parker, and McCray. Maybe Drew Logan as well factors in there. Probably more of as a depth piece, some spot snaps here and there. But those three guys, to me, four guys, are going to be battling out heavily for starting level snaps at the other position. But overall, you got about five names mixing in for that defensive end hierarchy on a defense, Neil, that needs more quarterback sack production. 1.75 sacks per game last season. And I do the per game stats as opposed to the total stats because, like I mentioned earlier in the show, you got teams playing 12 games versus 16 games at the high end. And Neil, that would rank 86th among all FBS teams last season. That's where that ranked. So obviously not good enough. That needs to improve. And we'll see if this new look defensive end hierarchy can be enough to improve it. On top of getting Jalen Hunt back healthy in the interior, and you're getting Dante Corleone back healthy, who I believe despite all the health issues, tied or set a career high in sacks last season for a single season. So Dante Corleone still adequate at getting to the quarterback despite the health issues he had. Any other defensive nuggets that you wanted to touch on, Neil, before we see them all in action on Monday afternoon?
Yeah, I think we hit the nail on the head. Obviously, you kind of know what you're going to get at the linebacker position for Cincinnati. Jake Golday, Jonathan Thompson, the likes of those two are going to spearhead your linebacker
I think
room.
linebacker might be, Neil,
And Simeon Coleman, yeah.
the most talented, best position group on the entire roster. Would you agree?
I would agree. It's a
Right there with
very
tight end.
deep,
I'd say tight end and linebacker are probably the
it
two
is a
best.
very deep position group,
Yeah.
right? Jack Dingle has played quality snaps. Simeon Coleman played quality snaps last season. Jonathan Thompson's played quality snaps.
Jake Golday is one of the
Jake
highest
Golday.
graded players in the Big 12 returning.
hmm I think that linebacker group is really going to make an impact for this team as well. And Russ, if you look at the defense from a season ago, right? The linebackers had to kind of do a little bit more than they're used to, right? With the depth of the defensive line being hurt, you lose the two guys to injury. The linebackers kind of had to take on a different role last season. But now that you're healthy, heading into fall camp, you have some of these guys back, everybody returning. I'm really excited to see what a position group like Jack Dingle, Jake Golday, Jonathan Thompson, Simeon Coleman, that linebacker group could really make an impact this season as well. And I think they're the most deep position group on the defensive side of the ball, per se.
Right. I mean, that's not even talk. I mean, they get Sincere Lewis back this year as well. You get Monte Whedon mixed in there.
hmm
You got, we mentioned Coleman, Brian Sims, the third sophomore. We haven't even seen much from him. And he was a highly rated player considering the rest of the recruits in that class. So, in the Bearcats class, that is. So, deep group, deep group for sure. I'd say tight end has the top of the line talent, but linebacker has a little bit deeper overall position. And I would say defensive tackle right there in the mix for that discussion as well from Cincinnati Bearcats football. We're so close to the start of fall camp, just a few days away from the action in Indiana. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.